So let's talk about the easy way to make pizza dough, or at least it's my easy way. There are lots of good ways to make pizza dough, but for what it's worth, this is just the method that I've landed on because I'm a guy who doesn't really like to measure stuff. I especially don't like to weigh stuff. So this is a way to make pizza dough kind of by feel. And just for fun, for the people who've seen me do this a million times, let's bake this bit of dough that has been in the refrigerator for 1 month. Yeek! Side on the bottom, it's all mushy. Oh God. So I start with like half a cup or about 100 mils of water per pizza or per portion, per loaf. Half a cup per pizza is a good sort of volume starting point for the size of pizza that would fit in a normal home oven. A thin crust style pizza. For a thicker crust, you could do a whole lot more dough. I usually make 4 or 8 loaves at a time. This is 2 cups of water, so this is like 4 pizzas. Generally do half a teaspoon of dried yeast per pizza, or a little bit more. I'm actually kind of rounding up significantly here. Really kind of more yeast means more yeasty flavor up to a point. For sugar, you really don't need any. I use a whole lot less than I used to. You know, maybe just a teeny little pinch per pizza, because I don't like how it sort of makes the texture of the dough more dense. But a little is good for flavor and good for fermentation, so in it goes. Flour, hashtag not an ad. I absolutely love this King Arthur pizza flour, 00 pizza flour. 00 refers to the sort of fineness of the grind. Basically it just means it's an extremely finely, come on, I don't understand bag technology sometimes. Anyway, so 00 just means it's very, very finely ground. And if you ever had like pizza or bread where like the surface of the loaf was so smooth that it almost felt like paper. It always had this kind of papery texture on your tongue, just the surface, the crust or something. That comes from 00 or any kind of really super finely ground flour that does have a lot of gluten in it, which also helps you get those long, thin sheets of dough. And I'll start with roughly twice the volume of flour to the volume of water, but like I'm gonna measure this completely by feel, you'll see. Salt, you probably do want to measure, and I go with like half a teaspoon of coarse kosher salt per pizza, so that's going to be, 2 teaspoons total in here. I sometimes round it up a little bit. I might go for like a whole tablespoon. It depends on what I'm going to put on it. Some people put like no salt into their pizza dough because they know it's going to have a whole bunch of salty ingredients on top of it, and so what's the point? And you know, if you take the salt out of the recipe, fermentation probably works a little bit better. And I like olive oil in pizza dough, but like less than I used to. I mean, honestly, just a blip, a drop, something like that. Just enriches the flavor and it makes the texture a little bit more kind of moist and dense, but too much and it gets kind of cakey. Wooden spoon, any kind of spoon would do it, but you want something stiff for sure. And the advantage of wood is that it kind of, unlike metal, which is stiffer, metal will not kind of conform to the sides of the bowl and it's not as good for scraping as wood is. And so I'm really a kind of a wood spoon or bamboo spoon man all day long. And there is a reason why I use a spoon and not my hands for this stage of the process. Dough at this stage is just really sticky stuff. I mean, this is kind of how you make glue traditionally. It's just with a very wet dough, wet batter basically. And I really don't like it when the dough gets in my like hair on my fingers. It just dries and then it hurts to pull it out. So I'm not touching it. I'm just gonna stir in as much flour as I can stir in with a wooden spoon, not my hands. So basically as much flour as this water will accept with the spoon. Now, why don't I measure with weight like a civilized person? Well, A, I'm honestly not even sure what I consider to be the perfect ratio because I think that depends on a lot of factors like the kind of flour you're using that day and probably like the weather and stuff like that. Plus, it's just so easy to just feel out using your senses. And I kind of like that maybe it's a little bit different every time and I can kind of respond to how the dough is feeling that day and how I'm feeling that day. Do I want to deal with a really sticky dough this day that's going to be incredibly delicious, but it's going to be a big pain in the butt because it's so sticky? Sure, I'm feeling up to that today. No, I'm feeling lazy today. So I'm going to put in more flour, make it less sticky and easier to work with, but slightly less good. Those are the kinds of calculations I can make if I just feel it out. More flour. And again, my hands are staying totally clean at this stage when the dough is just really, really sticky and messy and yucky. And I appreciate that. I mean, whenever it seems like it's just gonna get kind of hard to do this, like the water just kind of isn't accepting the flour is just kind of like puffing around everywhere instead of being absorbed into the massive dough, well, then I'll stop. Scrape down the sides of the bowl, but you know, that's about as much flour as I can get into there easily at this stage, and there's no reason to make it hard on myself, because the thing about dough is that if you just like let it knead itself for a little while, it's just so ridiculously easy to work with. Assuming it's a relatively high hydration dough like pizza dough generally is. With drier doughs, you really gotta knead them. With this, you just don't. Just let it sit. Let the water activate enzymes in there that will essentially knead the dough for us. Just cover it with a wet towel so that it doesn't dry out. Then you can wait as little as like 15 minutes and you will see an enormous difference. All of a sudden, the flour will have hydrated and the dough will seem much stickier. And as a result, you can get more flour in now without having to work too hard. Again, it's kind of as much as I can easily get in. Also, been some enzymatic changes to the wheat proteins that have essentially kneaded the dough for us. It's now very developed, that gluten. We're gonna get nice, stretchy, smooth, puffy, fluffy dough. Now at this point, that's probably like 70–80% hydration, something like that. Very wet dough. Wet doughs, if you don't know, with pizza dough and kind of bread making in general, a lot of water in the dough means you're gonna get like bigger, fluffier, bigger bubbles, more stretch, more steam, bigger everything, right? Whereas dry doughs tend to be kind of like tight and compact and dense. For pizza making purposes, I think wet doughs usually taste better depending on the style of pizza, but they're harder to work with because they stretch and they're more likely like stick to the peel as you're trying to get the pizza into the oven. So if I wanted, you know, I could get more flour into that, make that a little bit less sticky, but I really kind of like that. Maybe a little more flour. And at this point, you can kind of knead with your hands if you want. It gets a little hard to do it with the spoon, but I tend to find that if I'm doing more than what the spoon can do, it's actually like too much flour for my taste. I really like these high hydration doughs. Let's try to get all the flour wet so that it can hydrate. And again, because I used the spoon, I don't have to wash, you know, bits of dried dough out of the hair on my fingers. Cover it up and just let it rise now for like, you know, a couple hours. And while we prepare this bucket of carbs for dinner, let's maybe make a better nutritional choice for lunch with Immi, sponsor of this video. Save 15% by going to immieats.com/Ragusea. Immi is instant ramen that is based primarily on pumpkin seed protein rather than kind of, you know, plant starch. And so if you're like me and you're trying to swap out some of the carbs in your diet for more protein, this is an ideal convenience food. I mean, look at this flavor. 22 grams of protein, just 5 grams of net carbs. That's completely insane. You just boil it like any other instant ramen, like 6 minutes on the stove, maybe 3 minutes on the microwave. Oh, and the reason that beef is in quotation marks is that all Immi products are vegan. I'm not vegan, but I don't miss the meat in here at all. This is really super savory with like yeast extract and all these other good ingredients. And there you can see the pumpkin seed protein is the first ingredient, and then after that it's gluten. It does have real wheat gluten in it, so it chews like a noodle. It is a noodle. All they've really done is replaced the starch of the wheat. They've kept the protein. They got a bunch of new flavors now too. My favorite used to be the tom yum shrimp, but like the spicy red miso is pretty good, creamy chicken, pork tonkatsu. Remember, it's not real meat. Get that flavor pack in there and garnish it with whatever you want. Frozen peas are the greatest thing to ever happen to instant ramen, other than Immi itself, of course, and you can save 15% off your Immi or get a variety pack, whatever you'd like, with my link in the description, which is immieats.com/Ragusea. immieats.com/Ragusea for 15% off. Thank you, Immi, for a surprisingly nutritious lunch. Okay, so you don't have to, but it really helps to break the dough down into individual portions that you can then rest and then pick them up and then toss them as you need them. These are just 1 pint, like 450 ml glass containers from a company called Anchor. I just got them at the grocery store. And I just put a teeny little bit of olive oil into each one. I have in the past been accused of putting too much in. Let's see if I can be better. Okay, and then this dough has been doing what, you know, bakers would call the bulk ferment phase for just like an hour. It's doubled in size. It's really ready to go, but it needs to be broken down into individual pieces. Now for this phase, I might actually get some flour on my hands, and this is also a good time to work a little bit more flour into the dough if it's still a little too sticky to work with, and so I'll just use my floury hands to scrape the dough off of the spoon, because, you know, thank you for your service, you're done now. And then if you want to be super accurate, you could use a scale to divide it, but I just pinch off some at this point in my life at the age that I've reached. So plop in some there, and they don't have to be even, because I can just sort of look at them and put in more or less depending on how much it seems like I need. Okay, and then while my hands are still dirty, reach in, grab the ball and just kind of roll it around in the olive oil, and also use it to kind of paint the inside of the vessel with more olive oil so that it will stick less or be easier to get out when it's time to get it out. It's gonna stick some, no matter what. Some people don't oil the dough ball at all, you know, and they just sort of rip it up on its way out, and that's just fine. Now, if we tried to toss one of these into a pizza right now, it would probably tear. We wouldn't be able to stretch it out like it's, I'm trying to stretch it and it's not even really going as far as it really should, a dough like this. And it's because the gluten is too tense. When you mix any kind of dough with a bunch of gluten in it, tear it up, agitate it in any way, the gluten structure gets all kind of like tight, and then you just let it sit for like 20 minutes and it kind of relaxes, and then you can go ahead and shape your loaves. That's why pretty much any loaf, pizza dough or otherwise, you break it down in individual portions before you shape it, proof it, bake it. Cover it so it doesn't dry out. No, I've never had any problem with like gases getting in or out of a lid like this such that the yeast can breathe. They can breathe well enough. You can actually rise the dough entirely inside the container. Just mix it up once, put it in the container and let it rise for a while. That's good, I've done that a lot. But it comes out puffier and stretchier if you effectively knead it more than once over the course of its rising process. The ones I'm not gonna bake tonight, I put in the fridge, and I will leave them in here for like a really long time. I actually like them at least a day in here. Slow fermentation seems to kind of do different things to doughs. But what I really like it is when you leave it in for about a week in the refrigerator, a few days to a week. They get harder to stretch out as they age, but they get tastier. Here's one that has been in here for almost a month. I mean, you can freeze these for long-term storage, by the way. Just let it rise all the way and then just freeze it. But I let this go a long time, mostly because I just kind of forgot about it. And normally when it gets this old, which is about a month old, you get a little bit of mold on it, or it starts to kind of like liquefy, or at least there's like liquid pooling on top, which may be alcohol. This seems surprisingly edible, which maybe means that just the pH got low enough, the acid high enough from the fermentation that it just crowded out any other bad microorganisms. Oh, it feels liquidous on the bottom side. On the bottom, it's all mushy. Oh God. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, sure. I mean, it doesn't smell bad. I mean, there's no way that I could make a pizza out of that. It's so soft. It would just tear. So we'll just bake it as a loaf of pizza bread, which is this thing that my kids call it pizza bread. It's just pizza dough with olive oil, garlic powder, and pepper, and coarse salt on top. And I do this with like the underside of the dough, which has a bunch of bubbles on it that get all crispy in the oven, underside facing up. And then, especially with an old dough, this just tastes really, really good. One that's been aging in the refrigerator for quite a few days. Here's the fresh dough we just mixed up. It's been resting on the counter for like a half an hour. The way I usually get these out of here is just by like kind of pinching around the edge to separate it. And I turn the bowl just to separate it off the thing. There we go. All right. There is this dough. I'll do a pizza bread with this one as well. Olive oil on top, garlic powder, pepper and salt. Preheated pizza steel oven as hot as I can get it. Old dough on the steel. Oh, that looks weird. Look at that. Old one on the bottom. Halfway through, it's kind of baking normally, the old one on the bottom. New dough, old dough. Look at that, month old. Less of a rise on this one, not surprising. You need sort of gluten power to capture gas and rise up high, and this is just too old and weak. It feels kind of spongy cutting through it. There we go. New on the left, old on the right, and let's taste this. That's pretty good, honestly. To my surprise, it does not taste more fermented. It does not. I expected it to be like cheesy bread, basically, but it's just kind of tastes like a week old. Even at a month old, it's just kind of slightly spongier in texture and looks a little unappetizingly gray on the surface. Honestly, it's not that remarkable. I was hoping to report something more dramatic, but I see no point in aging it this long. A week basically gets you this minus the gooiness. Fresh stuff tastes, fresh. Okay, let's make an actual pizza. Get it out. Oil side up. Oil side is gonna be better for the interior of the pizza instead of the bottom of the pizza where it could sort of make things stick. And you can toss this in the air if you want to, but I usually just do simple gravity stretches because I don't really care about getting a perfectly round pizza or doing this quickly. I care about control. Those pretty bubbles in the surface, that's a good sign. Sauce, cheese, deer stick. This one stuck real bad on the way in, hence its wonky shape. Believe me when I tell you, it's much harder to make videos about pizza than it is to make pizza, because making videos slows you down and that gives you time for things to stick. But I actually think this is gonna taste pretty freaking great.